They hammered a blue sign into my shore and renamed my water Common Area. The pond didn't read their sign. The county would. The pond wakes before I do. Most mornings it exhales a thin mist that lifts off the cattails like a secret deciding to tell itself. I've counted my years here in Dragonflies, in the way light crawls down the old cypress and onto the dock my father and I built with hands that didn't need instructions. We set the posts in August mud while cicadas sawed the air. He knocked the last bolt with his wedding ring, smiled and said, "Water moves, records don't. Build where both can live." That Saturday, I stepped out with a mug and saw a new thing where no new thing should be. A metal stake at the curve of the bank, a blue aluminum rectangle with white letters. HOA Common Area. No private structures, no swimming, no fishing. Without permit. Someone had tied caution tape to the sign so it fluttered across my dock like a yellow scold. My neighbor B stood 2 lots over with her retriever, looking sheepish. "They came at dawn," she called. "Said the board voted. It's for safety." "Safety," I said, staring at the word like it would confess. The dock creaked under the tape. The heron that usually hunts my tree line gave the sign a side eye and lifted off, insulted. A golf cart buzzed up the greenbelt and delivered 2 men in vests and a woman with a clipboard I recognized from newsletters. Lydia, board president, punctual even for confrontations. She dismounted like a person who practices standing in rooms with microphones. "Morning, Mark," she said, and it was almost kind. "We're standardizing access. The pond is an HOA amenity. We have liability." "It's my pond," I said, not loud, like a fact you offer a friend. "It's tracked E on the plat," she said, flipping her clipboard to a rendering that made my shoreline look like a cartoon smile. "Dedicated to the Association for Stormwater and Recreation. Your dock is an encroachment. We'll need it removed." The word encroachment sat in the air like a dare. I felt my father's ring tap in my bones. I took a breath that tasted like cedar and years. "My deed calls the boundary to the meander line of the pond," I said. "The dock's been here 15 years. You waved at my kid learning to fish off it." Lydia's smile thinned. "The developer intended this water for everyone. It's safer with one rule." "Rules don't move lines," I said. The men in vests began unspooling tape along the bank, bright as warning. One stepped onto the dock, boots thunking against boards we'd sealed every June. "Hey, off please," I said, because I couldn't stand the sound of his weight on what my father left me. He looked to Lydia. She made a small shrug. He stepped back to the grass. B's retriever whined at the caution tape, tail confused. A kid on a scooter stopped on the path and read the sign out loud, slow, like a spell. Across the water, the fountain the HOA installed last summer coughed to life and threw a white rope into the morning. When it shut off at 9 each night, the frogs sang like they were relieved to have their conversation back. I wondered, suddenly, who had decided the pond needed to sound like a hotel. Mason from management called an hour later, bright as a calendar reminder. "We'll be sending a violation for the unapproved dock," he said, "and an invoice for shared pond maintenance." "Send whatever you like," I said. "I'm going to the county." I pulled the manila folder that has become my life's unglamorous hero. Deed, title policy, the original recorded plat, a survey from the week we closed. The survey had a little squiggle along the shore that always made me smile. Meander line, it said. The plat had tiny notes that took magnifiers and patience. I'd only skimmed them before. This time I read. And there, like a coin under silt, tracked E, stormwater easement and emergency overflow, ownership per lot lines, maintenance obligation, per association covenants. Ownership per lot lines, not owned by HOA, not dedicated fee simple. I traced the words with a fingertip that shook just enough to tell me my anger had found a spine. I set the folder on the counter, kissed 2 fingers to the photo of my dad holding a bluegill the year his hair went gray, and told the room, "We'll ask the records who this water belongs to." The pond outside riffled like it approved. The sign stayed blue and wrong. The county I knew would be black and white. The recorder's office felt like a library for arguments. Fluorescence hummed. The counter had a groove where 1,000 elbows had learned patience. A clerk with walnut brown hair in a tight twist, Lila on her badge, asked what I needed, and I slid my deed across like a tired confession. "Whisper Ridge, Phase 1, I said. "Original recorded plat, any dedication statements, and whatever's on file for Tract E." She fed a roll of Mylar to the light table. The neighborhood. Rows in bones, lot rectangles, bearings, the pond sketched in blue pencil wash. "Start here," Lila said, tapping a corner with her pen. "Certificate of dedication." She read aloud as if to a class. Tract E, stormwater detention and emergency overflow, perpetual drainage and maintenance easement in favor of Whisper Ridge Homeowners Association. Ownership of lots to meander. Line of pond. She looked up. "See that last part? Ownership of lots to meander line means the shoreline isn't all theirs. It's yours where your line hits water." A seriousness moved down my back like a zipper. "So the HOA maintains. They don't own." She turned to sheet 3, notes and easements. There it was again, in letters tiny as humility. "This dedication conveys no fee title to the association except as expressly indicated. Tract E fee ownership limited to outlet Weir parcel." Lila circled the outlet box with a purple pencil. "They own this little throat," she said. "They don't own the whole body." I wrote instrument numbers like coordinates to sanity. The plat, 2010-0978, the Stormwater Facilities Maintenance Agreement, 2010-0979, and the CC&Rs, 2010-0. She printed each, the paper warm as if truth had a temperature. "Want the as-built?" she asked. "What's that?" "Engineers' stamped plans showing where things actually ended up." She called Public Works. 5 minutes later, I found myself in a different building that smelled like wet wool and map ink. A stormwater engineer named Rena, ponytail, calm eyes, spread a giant plan on a table scarred by 100 coffee cups. Blue lines, contour squiggles, a neat square for the outlet structure. "The HOA's responsible to keep this operating," she said, tapping the weir. "They have an access easement to get to it. They don't get to boss around your shoreline unless you're blocking a pipe or grading the bank." "What about a wooden dock?" I asked, pointing to my cove. She shrugged. "We don't regulate docks unless they touch the outlet or increase erosion. Your dock's on piles set back from the bank. I wouldn't notice it if not for that new sign." She slid me a copy of the maintenance agreement. It said the quiet part out loud. "Association shall maintain stormwater structures. This easement does not convey ownership. Lot owners retain riparian rights subject to maintenance access." Riparian rights. The word felt like a weathered key. Back in the truck, I pulled up the county GIS. Parcels snapped to life, thin lines like spider silk. My lot boundary ran into the pond like a finger dipped in. The HOA did own a sliver, exactly where the outlet lived and the fountain's power ran. Everything else looked like a pizza cut to the meander. Property doesn't care what you're rendering. Hopes. It cares what your records say. I drove home with plans rolled in a rubber band and my father's voice pacing my skull. Water moves, records don't. Build where both can live. The blue sign still bit the bank. A kid in a red helmet stood reading it like scripture. I laid the plans on my kitchen table and let their weight settle the air. Then I wrote. Notice of misdesignation and demand to remove sign, the subject line began. I kept the body clean. No thunder, just weather. Dear Board and Management, my deed, Insterber 2010-06521, and the recorded plat, Insterber 2010-09178, define my west boundary as to the meander line of the pond. The plat's certificate of dedication expressly states that Tract E conveys a stormwater easement in favor of the association. Fee ownership is limited to the outlet weir parcel. The Stormwater Facilities Maintenance Agreement, Instruder 2010-09179, further clarifies the association's maintenance duties and access, and confirms that lot owners retain riparian rights. Your sign asserting HOA common area over my shoreline misrepresents ownership and interferes with my lawful use, including the existing dock. Please remove the sign from my bank within 48 hours, withdraw the violation, and confirm in writing that my shoreline will not be treated as common area. I'm happy to meet on site with a surveyor and city stormwater to confirm lines. Attached. Plat excerpts. Dedication page. Maintenance agreement. GIS parcel overlay. Photos. I CC'd Rena at Stormwater because daylight helps people be brave. I CC'd B because neighbors remember who stood where. I hovered over send long enough to hear the pond's frogs tune up, then clicked. 5 minutes later, Mason replied with a sugar packet of assurance, "The board believes the pond is association-owned amenity space. Our council will respond." Lydia wrote separately, "We'll set a site meeting. Please refrain from altering signage in the meantime." I poured another coffee and watched a dragonfly stitch its way along the cattails like somebody mending a hem. The sign's caution, tape flicked against my dock boards like a taunt. The county had spoken in ink, the water had spoken in light. Now the board would send a letter in a font that thinks it wins by kerning. If they came tomorrow with clipboards, I would meet them with paper that remembers. If they came with a contractor, I'd call a surveyor and a lawyer with a voice like the sound a stamp makes. The pond didn't read their sign. Records did. And records, when they're this clear, don't blink. They set the meeting for 9, the hour when the pond is most honest. No wind yet, just a skin of light you can read. I laced my boots like I was going to help my father mix concrete again, slid the county copies into a clipboard, and walked out to the blue sign that had called my dock an offense. Lydia came first, punctual as ever, with Mason from management and a man in a navy suit whose shoes looked thirsty for carpet. "Edgar Keene," he said, offering a hand that felt like a paperweight. "Association Council." Rena from Stormwater arrived with a tube of plans and a kindness in her eyes that didn't blunt her accuracy. B drifted over with her retriever, because shorelines are hard to ignore when people gather on them. "We'll keep this cordial," Lydia said, smile laminated. "Our goal is clarity." "Clarity is all I'm asking for," I said, and touched the blue sign with 2 fingers. "This says common area. The plat says otherwise." We started at my south corner where a capped rebar sleeps under the dwarf magnolia. I brushed soil aside and showed Edgar the stamp on the cap, the way the survey line runs toward the water like a string someone pulled through the earth. "Your deed says, to the meander line of the pond," he said, measured. "Developers sometimes dedicate water features to associations in practice regardless of the plat's poetry." Rena unrolled the as-built like a patient parent laying out rules. "Not poetry," she said. "Dedication language controls. Tract E is a stormwater facility. The HOA maintains the outlet and flow. Fee ownership of that little outlet parcel, here." She tapped the square throat of the pond. "And an easement for maintenance access. Lot owners retain riparian rights to their shorelines. That means use, dock, and reasonable enjoyment, so long as you don't block or damage the facility." Edgar adjusted his glasses. "The CC&Rs also give the HOA authority to regulate nuisances and visible improvements." "Regulate isn't the same as own," I said. "I'll argue style all day with an ACC if we're talking railings and stain. Color. I won't call my shoreline common because a sign got ambitious." We walked the curve. The retriever nosed the cattails, convinced there were secrets. The fountain coughed to life across the water and ruined the quiet with its civic virtue. A pair of turtles slid off a log like coins. Rena pointed to the bank where my dock piles rise. Set back from the toe, she noted. Minimal scour. If anything, less wave slap here than at the fountain. She turned to Edgar. If this were a river, we'd talk accretion and avulsion. Here we talk design intent. The plat says what? It says. Mason read the dedication I had highlighted in heavy yellow. Conveys no fee title to association except outlet weir parcel, he muttered, as if reading it out loud might change its meaning. Lydia's smile wavered, repaired itself. We still have to manage liability. You can require life rings at the outlet, Rena said. You can mark the outlet parcel as restricted. You can post rules about no glass, no litter, no swimming. In the deep cell, you cannot post a blanket "This is ours" sign on private banks. Edgar tried one more angle. Your dock was never approved. That's a process issue, I said. I'll submit a retroactive application today with photos, dimensions, and stain color. You can review it like any fence or porch. Denying it because it sits on common area won't survive the documents. B cleared her throat, awkward but brave. The board used to host fishing day off Mark's dock for the kids, she said. If it was a problem, it wasn't until this sign. Silence arranged itself like chairs after a party. Lydia rested her palm on the signpost, as if taking its pulse. We'll remove the caution tape from your dock today, she said. We'll refer the dock to the ACC for review. The sign... She glanced at Edgar, who kept his face smooth. The sign will be reconsidered. Reposition it at the outlet parcel, Rena said. Mark that as the association's structure and emergency overflow. That's where your fee title sits. That's where your rules should scream. Edgar lifted his chin. We reserve all rights under the CC&Rs to regulate use of water features. And I reserve the right to ask a judge whether a blue rectangle can move a meander line, I said. I kept my voice low, the way my father did when he was making a thing that needed to last. I'm not trying to win a point. I'm trying to keep the world honest where it meets my porch. By noon, Mason had pulled the caution tape off my railings, the retriever triumphantly carrying it like a dead snake. Lydia promised a written response. Edgar gave me a card as if the shape of his phone number could dissuade gravity. Rena rolled her plans and handed me a copy of the maintenance agreement like armor. I walked back to the kitchen table and set the documents down. The air changed in that small way paper can change it. Less opinion, more structure. I drafted the retroactive ACC application with photos of the dock through seasons. My father's hands on new lumber, my daughter's first bluegill, last fall's leaf drift making confetti of the surface. I attached Rena's note affirming no impact to the outlet. At 4:16 p.m., Edgar emailed, The association will suspend enforcement regarding your dock pending review. The sign will remain until the board consults further with counsel. At 4:18 p.m., I replied with a new subject line. Notice of false claim of common area. Request to cure within 48 hours. Intent to seek injunctive relief and damages for slander. Of title if not cured. I wasn't flexing. I was telling the truth the way iron does. Dusk came with frogs. The blue sign stood, but it looked less certain against the sound of everything that actually belongs here. I set my father's ring on the table beside the plat. We'll keep the dock, I told the quiet. The pond breathed, as if it had been holding one for me. 48 hours passed. The blue sign didn't blink. Edgar's email arrived at 8:03 a.m. The association declines to remove or relocate signage at this time. Enforcement is suspended pending council review. It read like a stall dressed in a suit. I called a name a neighbor at the feed store had pressed into my palm months earlier for land headaches. Alma Ruiz, real property litigator with a voice like a carpenter's square, true without drama. Send what you have, she said. I did. Deed. Plat with the dedication circled. the stormwater maintenance agreement, Rena's as-built, GIS overlays, photos of the sign and the dock, the violation letter, my email demanding cure. 10 minutes later, she called back. "We're fine," she said. "We'll seek a TRO, slander of title and interference with riparian use. You've got recorded clarity, they've got a blue rectangle. Meet me at the courthouse at 1, bring a clean shirt and your patience." I spent the morning gathering statements like a man collecting anchors. B signed an affidavit. 20 years of living by this water, the board's fishing day off my dock, the new signs yellow tape draped across rails my father had sanded. Rena couldn't sign in her official capacity, city rules, but she emailed a letter. Per recorded instruments, the HOA's fee ownership is limited to the outlet weir parcel. Lot owners retain riparian rights to shoreline use. Docks permitted, subject to maintenance access and erosion control. It was enough light to see by. Alma met me outside Department 4 with a file folder so thin it made me nervous, then flipped it open to reveal exactly the right things. "Truth travels light," she said, the corner of her mouth tilting. "We're asking for a narrow order. Remove the sign from your bank, stop threatening your dock as common area, and don't interfere with your use pending a hearing." Inside, the judge, McKinnon, hair swept back like she'd been too busy reading to bother with mirrors, listened with her chin propped on her hand. When she looked up, her eyes held the same clear impatience I'd seen in Rena's when people tried to argue with contours. Alma led. "Your Honor, the plat's dedication. This dedication conveys no fee title to the association except as expressly indicated. Tract E fee ownership limited to outlet weir parcel. Ownership of lots to meander line." The maintenance agreement confirms the HOA's duties and the limits of their rights. Despite this, the association placed a sign on Mr. Doyle's shoreline, designating it HOA Common Area, draped tape across his private dock, and threatened violations premised on ownership they do not hold. That clouds title and chills lawful use. We ask for a temporary restraining order requiring removal of the sign from his bank and enjoining interference with his dock pending a preliminary injunction. Edgar stood with a measured lament. "We have safety concerns. The pond is used by all residents. The association must regulate it. We suspended enforcement. No harm. The sign is an attempt to convey rules." The judge lifted the plat, squinted at the tiny print, then slid on readers, like armor. "Counsel," she said to Edgar, "do you dispute the dedication language?" Edgar smoothed a page that did not need smoothing. "We don't dispute the words, Your Honor. We dispute the implication that the association lacks authority to control shoreline structures. Authority to regulate isn't ownership," Alma said, mild as weather. "They can review materials and colors. They can't rename his shore." The judge tapped the maintenance agreement. "Who owns the outlet parcel?" "The HOA," Alma said. "Who owns the rest of the water's edge?" "The various lot owners," she said, "to the meander line." Judge McKinnon leaned back, made a small content noise people make when a puzzle clicks. "Likely success on the merits," she said, almost to herself. "Irreparable harm? A cloud on title and interference with access to one's water are not well measured in damages." She set the papers down, the sound of a gavel without. The performance. TRO granted. The association is ordered to remove any signage from the plaintiff's shoreline that designates it as common area within 24 hours. The association shall not obstruct or condition the plaintiff's reasonable riparian use, including the existing dock, pending further order. If the association wishes to post rules, it may do so at the outlet weir parcel it owns, provided rules. Do not misstate ownership. Preliminary injunction hearing in 14 days. Edgar opened his mouth, closed it, adjusted his tie. "We'll comply," he said, the words clean because the court required it. On the drive home, thunderheads shouldered up over the ridge. Mason's truck rolled into my yard before the clouds did. He carried a cordless impact and a look I recognized from men who have been told by a judge to unmake a thing. "We'll relocate the sign," he said. The screws squealed as they backed out of wood, then gave one by one. The blue rectangle came off my bank lighter than its opinions. He carried it down the shore to the outlet parcel like a penitent, moving a chair to its rightful room. I stood where the sign had been and watched the empty post holes fill with rain. The first drops puckered the pond's skin. The fountain shut off at its timer like a teenager obeying curfew. A heron shook out its wings and settled again on my piling, unbothered by paper or storms. I set the judge's order on the kitchen table beside my father's ring and the maintenance agreement, paper edges touching like neighbors. The window rattled with the first hard gust. The water moved, the record held, and for the first time. Since the blue rectangle appeared, my dock looked like what it had always been. A simple agreement between wood and water and a family who promised to keep both honest. The storm rinsed the air clean, and morning came on like a forgiveness. The blue sign now sat where it belonged, bolted to the outlet parcel, its rules aimed at the square throat of concrete the HOA actually owned. My shore was just shore again. The heron took back its piling without ceremony. The pond breathed in rings where raindrops had been. At 8:12 a.m., 2 emails arrived like birds choosing the same branch. From Mason, "ACC will review your retroactive dock application Thursday at 6 p.m. Please attend." From Edgar, "In light of the court's order, the association proposes to stipulate to a pond use and maintenance policy, clarifying responsibilities and rules. Draft attached." The PDF smelled like compromise. It also smelled like victory, not the kind with trumpets, the kind where paper finally matches the ground. I printed the draft and sat with a pen, and the sounds I love, frogs still waking, the soft tap of my daughter's feet upstairs, the kettle's sleepy complaint. The policy had good bones, life ring at the outlet, no swimming near the deep cell, trash rules, quiet hours for the fountain in nesting season. Then came the parts that wanted to overreach. "No private structures on pond edge," I crossed it out and wrote, "Docks permitted on owner shoreline subject to ACC review. No encroachment on outlet parcel. Preserve maintenance access 10 feet each side of weir. All fishing by HOA permit only." I edited, "Catch and release. Only. No glass. Respect private banks. A policy can teach care if it remembers who owns what." At the ACC meeting, someone had dragged folding tables into a horseshoe and set out a plate of cookies like a bribe for better tempers. 3 volunteers sat with highlighters and the look people get when they've read too many emails. Lydia, not chairing, took a seat in the row behind me. The edge in her posture had softened, not melted. B sat at my side with her retriever's leash looped around her wrist and the calm that comes from being right long enough to outlast arguments. The chair, Shelley, smiled the way you do when you'd rather be planting tomatoes. "We have a retroactive application for a dock on Lot 11, she said. "Photos attached. Applicant is present. City stormwater provided a letter noting no impact to outlet." She tapped her stack. "And we have—" She glanced up at me, almost sheepish. "A court order." I stood and said the plain things. The dock's footprint, the stain color, cedar tone, the piles set back from the toe of bank, the 15 years of use without complaint. The summer my father taught my daughter how to throw a line without hooking her ear. The life ring we hung on a nail because common sense doesn't need a policy to start it. Edgar cleared his throat. "The association seeks consistency," he said. "If docks are permitted, they should meet a standard. Width, rail height, distance, from outlet, ice load considerations, and a clause that says we aren't liable if someone ignores a no diving sign." "Good," Shelley said, underlining. "Standards help people do the right thing without guessing." Rena had sent a second note. Recommendation: minimum 2-foot freeboard above normal pool, piles set back from toe, no treated wood leaching into water. Use screws, not nails. Shelley read it aloud, the words turning from engineering into kindness in her mouth. Lydia spoke next, eyes on the paper, voice measured. For the record, the board acknowledges the recorded dedication language. We will not designate private banks as common area. We still intend to post rules at the outlet parcel for safety. She looked at me then, a small, real look. We got out over our skis. The ACC voted. Approved 3-0, with conditions. Stain maintained, no expansion without review, life ring mounted, keep 10 feet clear around the outlet. It felt less like a permission slip and more like a handshake done properly, with everyone looking each other in the eye. Alma called on my drive home. Preliminary injunction hearing is next week, she said. If they'll sign a consent order and adopt that policy with your edits, we can convert the TRO into something permanent by agreement. I'll also want a short shoreline acknowledgement. Recorded. Recites the plat language and the outlet parcel's limits. It's a light document with a heavy memory. What about the slander of title claim? I asked. We'll hold it in reserve, she said. If they fix the records and stop the nonsense, we chalk our fees to a lesson learned. If they waver, we press. That evening, my daughter sat on the dock with a sketchbook and asked me what meander meant. I took a stick and drew a line in the damp dirt, a curve, not a ruler's dream. Lines that follow water learn to bend, I said. The law can handle that. It writes down a promise to follow the shore wherever it goes. She nodded solemnly, then drew a blue line around a green lump of land and put a stick figure on, a little rectangle of brown. That's me, she said. That's us. The draft policy came back the next morning with most of my edits accepted and a few marked board discussion. Alma sent a short consent order for Edgar to chew. Association acknowledges fee ownership limited to outlet weir parcel. Lot owners own to meander line. Association may regulate for safety and aesthetics via ACC. No designation of private banks as common area. No interference with reasonable riparian use. Rules posted only at outlet parcel. Life ring required at outlet. Fountain quiet hours April-June. Reading it felt like setting a level on wood and seeing the bubble center itself without drama. We met again. Smaller room, fewer nerves. Edgar signed the consent order with the same pen he'd used to argue. It looked less dangerous in that job. Lydia initialed the policy, then handed me a copy with a smile that finally reached her eyes. Bring your daughter to the kids fishing. Morning next month, she said. On your dock, if you'll have us. I looked out the clubhouse window toward the water that had been mine, then almost taken from me by a rectangle and a tone. If you'll have the heron, I said. It doesn't read signs and it doesn't RSVP. That night, the fountain shut off early. The frogs started up without waiting. I sat on the boards my father and I sank into August mud and listened. To the way a neighborhood learns. It isn't loud. It's the sound of paper remembering the shore and people deciding to be as good as their records. The pond held the light until it was too much work, then let it go. In the darkness, I could hear the soft lick of water against wood, the oldest agreement we have still holding. Recording day felt like setting a stone where the path had been muddy. Alma met me at the county counter with 2 thin documents that weighed more than arguments. A shoreline acknowledgement reciting the exact plat language, lot ownership to the meander line, HOA fee title limited to the outlet weir parcel, and the consent order signed by Judge McKinnon. The clerk slid each page beneath glass, the scanner humming like a friendly insect, then stamped them with a sound that always feels like relief made audible. She handed us 2 instrument numbers, little coordinates that meant this won't be forgotten when people change. Frame them, Alma said, half smile. Or better, go back to your dock. The board sent a letter that afternoon to every homeowner. I read it twice, slowly, because humility isn't common on letterhead. The association acknowledges that, per the recorded plat and stormwater agreement, lot owners own to the meander line. The HOA's fee ownership is limited to the outlet parcel. The new pond use and maintenance policy is enclosed. Rules posted at the outlet. There was no apology sentence, but there was something better. Language that matched the ground. Mason installed the life ring at the outlet pedestal with a small, precise satisfaction. The relocated blue sign listed rules that finally knew their room. No swimming near the deep cell, keep 10 feet clear of the weir, no glass, catch and release, only fountain quiet hours in nesting season. B's retriever waited at my bank and shook himself in a glitter of water that landed on my jeans and felt like a baptism into a quieter version of this place. At the preliminary injunction hearing, the judge flipped through the consent order and the policy and looked mildly pleased, like a teacher grading a test with fewer wrong answers than expected. On stipulation, she said, and the stamp thumped again. The temporary order is dissolved into a permanent one on these terms. Alma and Edgar shook hands that weren't dramatic. We each kept our fees. The slander of title claim folded, up small and went back in Alma's briefcase like a tool you hope not to use again. Rena stopped by on her lunch break, boots muddy, ponytail damp from fieldwork. It's good policy, she said, reading the sign one more time. Water likes rules that help it do its job. She squinted toward my dock piles. And docks that don't boss it around. We held the kids' fishing morning a week later. Lydia brought donuts and a quiet way of standing that said she'd learned something that didn't fit neatly into minutes or motions. Shelley handed out barbless hooks. Someone's granddad demonstrated knots with hands that had spent a life tying things to other things. My daughter showed a smaller kid how to pinch a worm without making a fuss and then asked me to check her line. Clinch knot, I said, and we made one together. Wrap, wrap, wrap through the eye, snug it down. Our fingers moving with the kind of focus that's almost prayer. The heron stalked the shallows like a chaperone with opinions, but no jurisdiction. Edgar came down the path with a coffee and a clean pair of sneakers that somehow didn't offend the mud. Nice morning, he said. He tapped the outlet sign lightly. We put our rules where they belong. He looked at my dock, then at me. I'm glad you kept this. I didn't, I said. The record did. I just read it out loud. Later, when the kids were back on scooters and the frogs had started their small evening choir, I walked the curve of my bank with the consent order folded in my pocket like a note from someone who knows you. The meander line isn't a thing you can paint. It's a promise to follow water's shape and to let ownership be as honest as the shore. My father's ring clicked against the rail when I leaned, that soft metallic knuckle tap he used to make when a board seated just right. I could almost hear him. Water moves. Records don't. Build where both can live. We watched the fountain shut off early, in deference to nesting season. The pond's skin turned from coins to silk. Bees. Retriever lay down at the edge with a groan that sounded like contentment. Across the way, Mason tightened the life ring's bracket, and then stood for a second longer than he had to, looking at the surface the way people do when they remember why they took a job. I tucked the instrument receipts into the manila folder, behind the deed and the plat, and slid the folder back into the cabinet. Not because I think we'll never need it, because I want to live days that don't. On the dock, my daughter put her sketchbook in my lap. She'd drawn the pond round and, honest, our bank a green curve. The outlet parcel was a tiny square labeled Rules, and beside it, a life ring. Our dock looked like a brown line with 2 stick figures on it, and above them she'd written, in careful letters that tilted like cattails in a kind wind, Ours. The shore remembered its name. The paper did too. And for once, everyone agreed. If this story resonated, subscribe to HOA USA Stories, hit like, drop a comment, and share it to help more neighbors across the U.S.